Hello, everyone, and welcome to another exciting interview by Financial Insight. We're now at the tail end of day 2 of investing in African Mining Indaba, and I am in, the CTICC 2, where I'm having a conversation with Mwindwa Siakalima, the lead at Stanbic Bank Zambia. Now, we've obviously had 2 days of Mining Indaba. On day 1, we witnessed, the keynote speech by the president of Zambia. And then on day 2, we had Zambia Country Showcase Day. So Mwindwa is going to share with me just some of his reflections. But let's get it started. Mwindwa, I know you're obviously flustered and tired after 2 days of grueling Mining Indaba, but are you able to just share with us what your reflections were from the president's speech yesterday and how they resonate with, what, not only just the theme, how Stanbic Bank is interpreting the theme, but as well as, Stanbic's agenda for Zambia.
Good. I think starting off with yesterday. Yesterday was a power-packed day. I think a very good day in terms of flowing through into today's sessions. So the opening, I think, very well done by His Excellency, where I think there was emphasis on ensuring that I think we think of all the critical minerals that we have on the African continent as critical in terms of what you have in each individual country. And I like the thinking around how do we look at, yes, it's a copper country, but how do we think about cobalt, lithium, manganese, and all these other minerals that are needed for the energy transition and the green energy transition, which I think is driving a lot of what we're seeing in the mining sector. So I think the world is going green. Zambia is endowed with all the copper resources and other mineral resources that we do have that can play a big part in that. I was also happy to hear, I think, from the initial discussions that we had yesterday around, I think, just telling the world where we are from an economic operating environment. So the operating environment has been improving. The debt discussion was touched on, that the debt restructuring has now reached about 94%, as well as the GDP growth is poised to be sitting at around 6.4%. This year. That's a projection. We've seen, I think, an average in the last 4 years of about 5%, which is a sign that there are bigger and good things that are happening in the economy, which has then, I think, with those developments, given investor confidence, to many mining houses and investors that would like to invest in Zambia. When we look at that, we can also collaborate that with what we heard today, as well as yesterday, that we've seen investments amounting to about $12 billion in the mining sector alone. And if that is happening in the mining sector, then we are looking at a situation where, from a production perspective, the numbers are then poised to increase. We heard yesterday that the growth in production went up from 2024 into 2025 by 8%, 2023 into 2024 by 12%. So a 12% followed by an 8%.
Correct.
What we hope this year we're going to see another double digit, hopefully, because what we are hearing and what we heard today, Minister Honorable Kavuswe mentioned that we are poised to see the 1 million metric tons target that we is in the horizon. And I think we've never reached 1 million tons as a country. It's something that we are also watching to see that at least we can cross that first hurdle to the million tons mark in terms of copper production, which then, as government has set a target for itself to reach 3 million tons of copper by 2031. Will be a first milestone that we will see, towards the 3 million tons. I think it's basically encouraging to see the momentum that we're seeing. So the first 2 days have been marked by just understanding what the operating environment looks like, and then there's also the fact that we are talking about a theme that talks about stronger together progress through partnerships.
Correct.
And partnerships have been at the center of what has been from a mining ecosystem perspective, being the glue in terms of just keeping the sector together, but also to ensure that it grows through partnerships. I'll move, before I move on, actually, there's I think a big emphasis around reform that was discussed yesterday. So we've got the Geological and Minerals Development Act that was has been legislated and I think is effective the 1st of January this year. Out of that, there's also the minerals development regulations that are then effective this year. Those go into quite some detail. I won't go into some detail, but I think just the highlights of that is reserved thresholds for Zambian entities or Zambian-owned entities that would then be given an opportunity to take part in supplying, to the mining houses. So it's graduated. So 20% is the number that they basically started off with in terms of the threshold, minimum threshold that companies would be supplied with certain core mining supplies, goods or services, and then I think it graduates to about 25% in June, and over a 4-year period, meaning year 5, we then see that number go up to 40% for core mining. For non-core mining, it basically then is reserved in full for what is called or termed in the regulation Zambian-owned entities in that regulation. So there's opportunities in there for smaller companies to then get busy and set themselves up to get financing from the likes of Stanbic. In fact, welcome to Stanbic in terms of financing. Obviously, the off-taker is there in terms of the mining ecosystem that we have, the big mining houses. It's an opportunity for further growth in the economy for the small and medium enterprises, as well as even the larger local corporates that are owned, by Zambian owned entities or in the country. So it's also, I think, an important aspect in that the regulation that I'm talking about also added an important aspect around artisanal mining and small scale mining, which then I think in the Act there's a law that is part of the law that has been passed. It includes funding for that sort of development.
Correct.
The last piece around those reforms is around the commission that will look at regulating the entire industry. We are a regulated entity, so we know what it is to be regulated. We are accountable to the Bank of Zambia, and I think what the new law is trying to do is also regulate the mining industry. So we've heard of licensing as well as mineral rights. Also, I think coming under that ambit. But what I'm also happy about, what was discussed yesterday, is that the cadastre has also been looked at, and there's digital transformation happening there. I heard, I think recently, that there's also a certain part of it that is being linked to the Zambia, the Smart Zambia portal, so that it's easy for you, to be able to monitor where your license is in terms of approval. So you apply online, you can see how far your license is going, and then you can also basically, I think, do everything online, which I think brings about efficiency and transparency. I think those are the sort of 2-3 things that they are looking at, and also I think just fairness in that everything is on the system and there's no paperwork that needs to be pushed, from one end to the other. The last point I'll touch on, which was very key, which is important, is from a social, I can call it environmental, social, and governance side of things. Just making sure that the environment is kept as top of mind for the mining sector in terms of what the impact is around the different activities, making sure that the environment is well looked after. As well as, in addition, you go into safety records. I think Minister Matashe, from a South Africa perspective, gave a number in terms of how South Africa, we are in Cape Town. South Africa has seen that number come down. It's not zero, but I think they are on their way to ensuring that number keeps coming down year on year. It's something that is also an important thing for Zambia. We gave and stood up for a minute of silence for all those who passed on last year in the mining industry, as at the Africa Mining Indaba. So I think that's one thing that we need to look at as a key element in terms of how do we then ensure we protect lives. Yes, there's investments, there's growth that needs to be looked at from a mining perspective, but there's also safety and lives that need to be looked after. That would be, I think, a key summary of yesterday's discussion. The last point, I think, would be collaborations with the mining services side of things, and one key service or input into mining is electricity. So we heard how then electricity, which I'll then dovetail into today's discussion, how electricity is a key component for mining, and how we have, as a country, then navigated, and not just as a country, as Africa navigated that challenge. So in other parts there's excess power, in other parts there's deficits, and just making sure that infrastructure is built to allow for the East African power pool to be connected to the Southern African power pool. Where are the interconnectors? There's discussion around Lobito corridor. How do we then drive to ensure that there's infrastructure that's being built to bring in goods from Angola into Zambia, into DRC, and then how do we also connect the different points such as Kapiri into Dar es Salaam. Those are key sort of infrastructure projects that were discussed. They were raised as part of the solution to bringing in efficiency into this sector, the mining sector. There's also, I think, another aspect that was raised to say, let's not export unprocessed, raw material. So let's look at value addition. So bring in value addition into the process. From a value addition perspective, let's not just look at getting cathodes and things like that, but let's talk about the copper wire as opposed to and even other things that come out of the minerals that we have. So it's not just copper. It's other things that you can do, car batteries, or not even car batteries, but EMV batteries that can actually be part of what can be produced locally. So I think the discussion is around, you've got the resources, you've got the people and technology, as well as the product. But sometimes when I say there's also the aspect of capital. So capital is needed. We have the people, we have the resource, but we need capital from an African perspective, and it's something that we are here as financiers to coordinate, and bring in that investment capital, but also provide, the financing for the activity that is happening in the mining sector. So the financial sector plays a key role in just enabling all these capital flows that in the mining sector. But we need to think about how then do we bring in more and more capital by ensuring that the piece, obviously, that we have is not taken for granted. I think I'll just touch on that. In that, I think what was discussed is there's a lot of emphasis on ensuring that there's no things that go around, such as illegal mining. That was one key aspect that was raised to ensure that the flows that are within the mining sector are kept in the right sort of channels to ensure that you continue having peace as countries. So that was yesterday. Today, we had a very good discussion and heard from different stakeholders like Copperbelt Energy, Excalibur doing the geological mapping and electromagnetic mapping over Zambia using those planes that they have. We also heard from the minister just now on the Zambia showcase. And I think what the discussion was around mapping as a solution to further growth. I think they're doing a good job. Yes, it's partially done in terms of the geological mapping, but just to see where the resource is sitting. And the next step, obviously, is if we know where all the resources are sitting, what we have as a country with the improved environment around things like the cadastre, then it's easier to allocate licenses that do not overlap. And I think those are some of the efficiencies that have been brought into the new system, where there's no licenses that are on top of each other in terms of what's on the ground. That is cleaned up, that efficiency is brought about. But also I think just knowing where the tenements start and end, where the resource is sitting, is a key aspect of what was discussed today. The other side of the discussion today, obviously starting with CEC, was that without energy, without that enabler, there's no other sector that can grow as quickly as they want without energy. So putting in energy and ensuring that we close the gap between the approximately, it's about 3.9 gigawatts, from 3.9 gigawatts to the 10 gigawatts that has been given as an outlook. We as a country, have got an opportunity to actually raise our hands to investors, more investors, locally and international, to invest in the energy sector, because at the moment we basically need to grow from the 4 to 10 gigawatts to get to the aspiration of 3 million tons. So that will then drive that process in terms of how do we then invest and put our hands up as financiers, get involved in things like we've at Stanbic been involved in, being part of the solution by providing $71.1 million United States dollars to a project in Chisamba under the Kariba North Bank Extension Program, KNBE, where we then are providing that facility as a solar type project that we invested in. So we looked at that as an example of what public, plus the private sector can do to get to a solution of reducing the power deficit. So partnerships, growth was part of it, but also I think in closing for today's session, we also had I think from the chair of ZCCM IH that Zambia is one of the best destinations for investments. So if investors are not yet looking at Zambia, it's a place to go right now for investment in mining.
Absolutely. Mwindwa, thank you so much for sharing your insights from the day one and day two.
Thank you so much, Mwela.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
You've heard it for yourself. We've been speaking to the Chief Executive at Stanbic Bank Zambia. So stay tuned as we continue to cover the bank at Mining Indaba. I've been your host for this interview, Mwindwa Siakalima. And as we always say, or you say it with me, Mwindwa?
Yet to know. Thank you.